Ford showed off their new 2024 Mustang for the NASCAR Cup Series on Wednesday, and it's aggressive. The new Mustang for the Cup Series will be the Mustang Dark Horse. There's not going to be an MSRP overcharge on it because, of course, it's a race car. But if you go to try to buy one at the dealer, you're looking at around $90,000 to $100,000 right now, which is worth it to some people. But we're only going to talk about the NASCAR Cup Series version of it. Ford showed it off on Wednesday, and they did some filming of it a few weeks ago at Daytona during live tour. So people already got a glimpse of it from the side. We haven't actually got any pictures of the nose until today. And they made some major changes. When you take one look at it, you completely understand that Ford's designers and engineers and aerodynamicists took advantage of every single inch of this car that they absolutely could. And it looks super aggressive. It looks great. Are Chevy and Toyota going to be happy about it? Well, they had to sign off on it, of course, because it has to go through the review process. But I'll be completely honest, when you look at something like this Mustang, that's exactly what you want from an aero standpoint. And granted, we thought the same thing about the Chevy Camaro back in 2018, I believe in the Gen 6 era. When they came out, everyone's like, that car is going to absolutely dominate. I think it was Kyle Busch that said, we might as well pack our bags up and go home the first time that he saw it. Granted, it didn't end up being that dominant until, you know, a little bit down the line. But that first year, they struggled. And maybe the Mustang will struggle in its first year as well. But there are some aggressive body changes to the front end of this race car and to the sides as well, which we'll get into in a moment. But you don't need to investigate these changes like you're Russ Cole in Louisiana to see what all the major differences are, because the first and biggest change that is completely noticeable to everybody outside of Ray Charles and Helen Keller are those fender flares, which are absolutely massive and super aggressive. Even Cadillac's designers from back in the day are impressed by these because they're substantial. And the way that the nose slopes down right there and the way that the air is going to go across the nose and over those fenders right there had to look absolutely incredible in the wind tunnel, and it's exactly why they more than likely did this. The whole nose overall, though, is exactly what you would want out of this car. It slants down a little bit more than the old car, so much more aggressive, and it has to, of course, somewhat resemble the production model that is going to be out there for consumers to buy, and it does do that as well. And I'll put up a side-by-side here in a second that shows that. But the car got a lot more square in a sense because the new Mustang Dark Horse, Mustang S650 nose and everything like that are much more aggressive than the predecessor. But even the headlight area got squared up a little bit on this car. One thing that won't change on it is how good this car pushes at super speedways, because they left that front bumper area pretty square. There's a little bit of a curve to it, but nothing like that Chevy Camaro pointy nose, and they were like, it just doesn't push well at super speedways. Can't imagine why. You got to literally hit them square every single time. Don't have to worry about that with this Mustang right here. But those fender flares alone are just the biggest and most obvious change as well. The air duct area got a little bit more squared up there as well. Definitely optimized for aerodynamics. You're going to get some more front end downforce out of that. That sloped nose as well, kind of like those old drop nose Porsches. Yeah, it's going to give a ton of downforce here. I did see one person mention as well, like, obviously they've put a ton of time into the aero of this car and how it's going to race, or presumably going to race, is, you know, with the added front end downforce that they're definitely getting from this, much more than what they were getting with their current generation Mustang, is what's like the tire degradation going to be for this car. And I don't think it's going to be drastically different than what it is now. Of course, they wouldn't do that, but you're definitely going to get more front end downforce the way that that hood and that whole nose area is shaped. And especially with those fender flares, you're capturing all of that kind of in there, right on top. I love the hand motions to really emphasize, you know, the downforce, and it potentially could wear tires out. I don't think it's going to, but it's a food for thought, as they say. The other big change too, outside of obvious the nose change and those fender flares, is when you look at the side of this car, it is nearly square. Those fender flares set up perfectly. That body line that runs off the top of the fender and then down the front of the fender towards the A-pillar right there, that thing is super square, and that is an aerodynamicist's dream. That's exactly what these teams want. These teams want flat sides on their race car. Go back and look at the old Gen 6 car. They love to have a square side of the car because it's just going to perform better, especially in the corners and catching the wind and everything like that that goes along with it. This is what an aerodynamicist wants, and Ford absolutely gave it to their teams with this car. Is it going to perform? Again, we're not 100% sure. Those fenders, though, from the side with that big arch, the little flare on top of the fender right there, they do look kind of ridiculous. And obviously, you can see a picture of it as I'm talking about it. And, you know, again, I'm not an aerodynamicist. Most of us aren't. I'm sure somebody in the comments will say that they are, and congratulations. But when you look at it, you're like, this is definitely what you want out of a race car here. So overall, absolutely fantastic looking car. The rear of the race car as well looks kind of like the rear of all the other next-gen Gen 7 cars. There's not too much that they do back there. The sticker package looks good. They have the Dark Horse Mustang emblem in the center of the deck lid, trunk, bumper, whatever you want to call it, right there. They're also running the short track spoiler on it, which I think is hilarious considering it was at Daytona. But overall, this car looks really aggressive. It looks really good. And hopefully for Ford, it races just as well. I think Ford throughout the second half of this year has definitely found more speed. Obviously, RFK got those 3 wins with Chris Buescher, 3 wins in 5 weeks. You now have Ryan Blaney, who's racked up 3 wins as well. Logano also has a win. And then outside of that, they've kind of been out to lunch. But if you're Stewart-Haas Racing, you have to be encouraged by what you're seeing here out of this car. Granted, it comes down to some people that they have working there too, and then getting that whole program turned around. But overall, Ford teams have to be incredibly happy with what they're seeing from these new body changes that they're getting here. Toyota is also going to introduce a nose change to their Camry. I see a lot of people speculating, bring us the Supra. They're absolutely not going to do that. NASCAR is a marketing platform for all of the OEMs, and right now, the other 2 aren't marketing sedans, and Toyota still has the best-selling family sedan in the country in the Toyota Camry. There's no way they're going to scrap that to bring in the Supra, which isn't going to contend in terms of sales and notoriety and capturing people's attention the same way that the Camaro and the Mustang did. Doesn't make any sense. That's why they haven't done it. And I'm not sure if they're really going to keep that car around forever. So having the Camry come in with no competition from the other 2 OEMs in terms of that type of car and that type of platform, they're definitely keeping the Camry. But the Camry is getting a nose change for the production model in 2024, which means that they're going to update it for the Cup side. We haven't seen what it looks like yet. I doubt it's going to look as aggressive as that Ford change did, because yikes. But if it does, Chevy is in a world of hurt right now, especially if those 2 cars come out of the gate next year looking really good. Chevy's going to have to figure out how to speed up that timeline on the Camaro replacement, which of course we keep being told that, you know, the EV or the hybrid model car that's going to replace the Camaro is going to be what the next model is that races in NASCAR, except we haven't seen it yet. And Chevy can't go out and grab the SS like they did from Australia when it was a Holden and bring it over here and just enter it into NASCAR, produce a couple hundred road-going models on the production side, and then be like, oh yeah, this meets all the regulations. They don't have any models out there. Trust me, I've scoured over the GM website to be like, what car can they take? Currently, all that they have are the Malibu, which they're absolutely not going to make the Malibu the NASCAR Cup Series car. There's no marketing purpose for that. The Malibu is a fleet car. It's just out there for rental car companies to buy and to rent out to everybody that's on vacation. Nobody loves going to Orlando and getting a rental car more than anybody that goes to Disney. And they're definitely getting a Chevy Malibu. So there's no real purpose in doing that because there's not a ton of consumers that are out there buying new Chevy Malibus. And if you are, why? Let me know. I would love to know why the Malibu is the car that you picked when there's a lot of other options out there. And then, of course, the only other car they have is the Corvette, and that is now a mid-engine sports car, which doesn't really fit the whole marketing platform as well. And getting that body to fit into a NASCAR template is going to look super... You think the Supra in the Xfinity Series looks absolutely atrocious. It's an abomination. Dr. Frankenstein even looked at that and was like, phew, that thing is not roadworthy. The Corvette would look 1,000 times worse. So I don't think that Chevy's going to do that because it's going to look absolutely absurd. They're going to have to come out with something different, or they're going to have to switch manufacturers. GM is. It's going to have to leave Chevy and they'll have to go over to like Cadillac, because Cadillac is at least still producing the CT4 Blackwing and the CT5 Blackwing, which would be great versions of a NASCAR Cup Series and Xfinity car for them to push. But of course, there's a ton of brand equity with Chevrolet, so they're not going to do that. But it does make a lot of sense if they did. So let me know in the comments. Do you love the new Mustang? Do you think it's going to be fast? And then what should Chevy replace the Camaro with? Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok @BreakHard, Instagram, and Twitter @BreakHardBlog.